Hey friends, you're tuned in to the Learn or Be Learned podcast, a show where wisdom meets curiosity in order to discover the human experience. I'm your host, Shiva D, and remember, you either learn from or you're learned from. Now, let's get back to the show. Welcome back, everybody, to another great episode here on Learn or Be Learned. Today's guest is Lucie Potasnik, and she has worked and created 6-7-figure businesses as an entrepreneur, and now she's focused on coaching and speaking, and I'm just excited to have her here to share some really interesting ideas. So thank you, Lucie, for being here.
Well, thank you, Shiva, so much for having me. I am also grateful and excited to be here as well.
Absolutely. So, before we jump in, can you share a little bit of backstory about, what you do, how you got here, and so forth?
Yeah, my backstory actually has a lot to do with horses. I like to say that I was a little girl with a big dream. I was obsessed with horses ever since I can remember. And just like Napoleon Hill says, the starting point for all achievement is a burning desire. And I can say with absolute certainty that I had this obsession of horses that was almost born within me, if you will. And so I grew up just outside of Detroit in suburbia. And I had two middle class blue collar parents. So the idea of horses was really outside of the realm of possibilities, despite my best efforts begging my dad day in and day out, Dad, please buy me a horse. My mom worked two factory jobs, and it was out of the realm of possibilities. And I never gave up on my dream, to the point where I would pray at night, like, Dear God, please let me just dream that I'm riding a horse in my dreams, so that way it actually feels like I'm doing it in real life. And it wasn't long before I realized that I had to take matters into my own hands. So the day that I turned 16 was the day that I got my driver's license, and the same day that I put my Craigslist ad online saying, I will ride your horse for free. And that was when I discovered that if you can follow your passion and figure out where your skill set lies, what your talents are, and exploit them in the service of others, you are going to be met with unprecedented success and true fulfillment. So that's what I did. And sure enough, I had all these yahoos calling me with their wild, unbroke, green broke horses that hadn't been handled, ridden, or touched in 5 or 10 years. And I'm like this confident, cocky 16-year-old with a brand new driver's license driving all over God's country, riding these people's horses. And mind you, I didn't have any formal education or instruction. So next thing you know, I'm getting bucked off and thrown off and flipped over on, and like you name it, I experienced it. But despite how many times that I ate dirt, I never gave up. I stayed just like laser focused on my goals, and didn't matter how many times I fell off. I was just as excited and happy to crawl right back on the horse and give it another try. And it was just like one of those failing forward moments where life is going to throw curveballs, and life is, going to throw you on the ground. But it's up to us not to let that just distract us or derail us from our dreams, from following our purpose and our passion. And so I ended up meeting a horse dealer. He'd get in like 50 horses a week, and I had to ride everything, and I had to sell it fast, quick, cheap, because if I didn't sell it fast enough, he was going to ship it to Canada to go to the slaughterhouses. So here I am,
Oh,
like
wow.
16-year-old girl, yeah, on a mission to save all the horses of the world. And that was like my first step into the world of an entrepreneur, because it was like the sky is the limit. How many horses do you want to ride today? How many horses do you want to save today? 5, 10, 15? And then I ended up doing that, selling horses while I was in high school, in college. I graduated college. I got scooped up into the corporate world, and I was still selling horses on the side. And it ended up that I had like the world's worst, most miserable, negative, pessimistic boss you could ever imagine to have. And here I am, like, just like radiating like positivity and sunshine. And he was probably just annoyed with me as I was with him. And we had to travel together, and we were like traveling all over the country to these different manufacturing plants. And he's literally listing off every single thing that could go wrong. And I'm like, Justin, that does not serve you. Because I had just seen the movie The Secret when I was 18, and I was just full of
Mm-hmm.
excitement and inspiration. I'm like, oh my God, this is so empowering. And so I'm trying to like teach him this. And meanwhile, I'm working on these spreadsheets, these Excel spreadsheets, like life in the cube, right, in corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm working on these spreadsheets, I've got my ear pods in. I'm listening to Dr. Wayne Dyer, and I'm just receiving like all of his beautiful wisdom, all of his universal truths. I'm taking notes while I'm keying in my Excel spreadsheets. And one of the number 2 rule for true success and fulfillment in life is don't die with your music still inside of you. And so I
Mm-hmm.
knew that I had to escape the cube, and I had to ditch the corporate world. And although it was hands down one of the scariest things I've ever done, it's been by far one of the most rewarding and gratifying moments or decisions that I've made. So I went on to build and scale a 7-figure business where I now buy, train, and sell horses all over the country. And I accidentally opened up one of Michigan's largest public trail riding companies, kind of on accident, just because I loved horseback riding. I loved trail riding. Trail riding was my favorite thing. And I wanted to share that with the world. And it
Mm-hmm.
just word of mouth spread. And we became very popular very fast. And everything happened very naturally and very organically. And I'm not saying that as a, oh, hey, look at me, like I'm lucky, I'm special. No, I'm saying that because I believe that I need to, we're all supposed to live, lead, and inspire by example. So therefore, if I did it, that means that you absolutely can do it. And your audience, everyone listening can do the same things. And I feel like I've been blessed to be able to kind of put together a toolbox of different strategies, tools, and techniques to understand that we live in this, to understand the quantum physics side of this vibrational universe that we're living in, and essentially how to leverage the laws of the universe to very intentionally create the life of your dreams. So that is why I am here now, because I'm on a mission to positively inspire and positively impact as many people around the world to become the best versions of themselves as possible.
Mm-hmm. And I'm excited for this conversation because I always talk about, obviously mindset shapes all, right? In order to do something, you have to think about it, and how you think about something affects, your behavior, the results, everything. So it all starts internally. And you mentioned vibrations, which I think is interesting because, in my opinion, I also think people emit a certain, almost like an aura, right? Like people say vibes, right? Good vibe, bad vibe. You can almost sense something off of somebody based off of probably nonverbal cues and all sorts of things that our brain is doing behind the scenes. But whatever it is, I think there is this level extent here that we almost take for granted that we don't see unless we start talking about it, right? So kind of like what you were doing. So I'm interested to see more on what you think about the idea of, energy, somebody's vibrations, and things like that. This, what do we call it? Metaphysical reality, metaphysics, quantum realm, these type of stuff.
Oh, well, these are my favorite things to talk about, so I'm super excited. Yeah, I like the basic, the fundamental idea is that everything is energy. That we live in a vibrational universe where all things move and all things vibrate, and all energy is governed by law. So if we know that every single thing is made up of matter, which is made up of atoms, and if you break down an atom, you've got the electrons and the protons. We know that we are energetic beings by nature. And not only are we energetic beings, but we're energetic interpreters. So when you take our 5 senses and you're like, okay, when we're interpreting a noise or a sound, how are we interpreting it? We're interpreting the vibration that that sound is making in the airwaves. And the same thing when we are interpreting like a visual, something that our eyes are seeing, we are interpreting the wavelengths of the frequency of the light on the light spectrum that our eyes are capable of interpreting. And same thing goes with taste, touch, and smell. It's all vibration. And so when you start to understand that everything is vibration, and everything is energy, and everything carries a frequency, then you start to understand that your thoughts also carry an energy and they also carry a vibration to them. And that then you understand the power of your thoughts and the power of your words are so just instrumental in creating the 3D reality that you are now vividly experiencing. And a lot of people right now, I'd say that what's it called? Victim culture, victim mentality is very prevalent, and everybody wants to blame everything else for their problems. Everyone wants to blame external or outside circumstances. But the truth of the matter is that your external reality, what you're experiencing in your outer world, is a direct reflection of your inner world. It's a direct reflection of the voice in your head, of the thoughts that you're thinking, of the emotions that you're allowing yourself to feel. And so that's why it's so important to understand that we're only ever one decision away from a completely different reality, from a completely different experience. And all it takes is a shift in our mindset, a shift in our perspective. Because when we shift the way we start to look at things, just like Dr. Wayne Dyer says, when we shift the way we look at things, the things we look at begin to change. And just like Mahatma Gandhi said, all change starts within ourselves. So if we know that our external world is a mirror, when you look in a mirror and the reflection in the mirror is frowning, you can't say, okay, mirror, well, when you start smiling, I'll smile back. That's not how a mirror
Right.
works. If we want the
Right.
mirror to smile back, we have to be the change that we want to see, that we want to experience. So therefore, it's up to us to change internally. And once we do that, then we can experience the benefit in our external world.
Right. And I think that's really important because I always talk about the reflection of your internal produces the external. And I think a common idea that's always talked about in this space is law of attraction, right? So your well, first off, let's get into that a little bit. What exactly is the law of attraction and how does it kind of work based on what you're saying?
So law of attraction is a secondary law. The first law is the law of vibration, which simply states that everything moves, everything vibrates, nothing rests. Everything is in a perpetual state of motion, and everything carries its own unique frequency. Like attracts like. So things of a similar frequency are going to be drawn to each other. So
Mm,
and the key principle to that, the thing that's most important to understand is that we don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. And so sometimes when people are just discovering law of attraction or just learning about it, they think like, oh, all I have to do is think a thought and then poof, it's going to effortlessly manifest into my physical reality. And
right.
it's not,
Which is why
yes,
I
but
also
no.
think, yeah, I was gonna say this is why I also think it gets a bad rap. Is people think it's just some delusion, right?
Yeah, and the way I like to explain law of attraction is it's just like gravity. It's a universal law that it's kind of like gravity. If whether you want to exist, I'm sorry, whether you want to acknowledge its existence or not, it's still working every single moment of every single day. So if I know gravity is constantly at work and in motion, if I take this pen and I drop it, I know with absolute certainty it's going to fall. Why?
Mm,
Because this pen is energy and it's ruled by, and all energy is governed by law. And the law of gravity states that when I drop this, it's going to fall. Well, the law of attraction works the exact same way. It's a universal law that governs all energy. Like attracts like. We don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. So therefore, it's up to us to do the work, to be very intentional, to raise our vibration so that way we can increase our frequency, and that way we're resonating with the things that we want to create, the things that we desire to experience or attract into our life most. Because if we ever have a goal or a desire, whatever it is that we are like wanting to create, attract, experience in our life, the reason why it's not in our life already is because we're not matching the vibration of that thing. Therefore, it's up to us to do the work to raise our vibration so that way we can attract that person, place, thing, experience to our 3D reality. So there's I like to give people a whole different toolbox of different tools, strategies, techniques that they can start implementing today that's going to help rewire their subconscious mind, raise their vibration, and essentially transform their identity so that way they can start seeing the progress and they can start taking massive action towards their goals, and they can start essentially collapsing timelines to become the person that they desire to be.
Mm-hmm. So, and what does that look like for one to match the reality that they are desiring, right? You said to
Yeah.
raise your vibration. So, and you said there's a bunch of tools and techniques. What does something like that look like that someone can use?
There's so many. One of my favorite, like one of my non-negotiables is meditation. So
Mm-hmm.
I tend to talk about meditation a lot every single morning. As soon as my eyes wake up, that's my non-negotiable. I'll immediately drop right into a meditative state. And I love telling people, like, if there's a one thing I recommend everybody start doing immediately, that's going to just up level every single area of their life and take their business and their life to new heights, it's to start meditating. And even if they've never meditated before, even gifting yourself 10 to 15 minutes every single morning, it's going to create just incredible positive change in your life. The reason why is because meditation, well, first of all, the definition of meditation means to become aware of oneself. It's a
Mm-hmm.
practice. And what this practice allows us to do is we're quieting our mind. If we know that humans on average think between 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those thoughts are negative, it's like that little voice in our head and keeps going and is constantly tearing us down, telling us that we're not good enough. Who do we think we are? What are the other people going to think? We're probably just going to fail anyways. Whatever like negative self-talk that's been playing on repeat for how many years. Well, when we close our eyes and we focus on our breath and we drop into this meditative state, what happens is we're quieting that voice and we're releasing all of the worries, washing away all of the fear, letting go of all of the limiting beliefs, anything that's holding us back, weighing us down. We're literally lifting the weight off of our shoulders. And when we do that, we are allowing our vibration to rise to its natural space, or to its natural set point. And what happens is in this tranquil space of just of a quieted mind, eventually what's going to happen is a thought is going to flow in. Whatever that thought may be, it might be like, oh, I have to call to make that appointment for the dentist later. And then the beauty about meditation is you're like, oh, I'm thinking a thought. So then you just go ahead and lovingly release it. And then whether it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, or I'm sorry, 5, 10, 20 seconds later, another thought is going to immediately come to your mind. And the trick is to not fall down the rabbit hole of like, oh, I got to go pick the kids up. Oh, then we got to go grocery shopping. Oh, what are we making for dinner? I forgot. But and even if you do fall down that rabbit hole, that's okay too. But at least you recognize that, like, oh, I'm in another train of thought, stopping, doing like a pattern interrupt and being like, oh, wait, lovingly release those thoughts and return back to my breath. And the reason why that's such a powerful practice is because it allows us to become aware of the thoughts that we're thinking. So many people are operating with under these unconscious patterns. If we take a step back and we look at our life, we will soon realize that our life is nothing more than a sequence of patterns that we just continue to run day in and day out. We are by nature creatures of habit. We like to do the same thing every single morning, every single afternoon, every single evening. And therefore, we fall into these patterns of focus, patterns of thought, patterns of language, and patterns of physiology, how we're moving our body. So
Right.
when we when we have these patterns that have essentially become who we are, they're just operating at an unconscious level, and they're determining the energy or the vibration that we're operating at. So if we have all of these unconscious patterns that are essentially running our life, we can't change them if we're unaware of them. And that's why all change that's why awareness is so important, because all change is preceded by awareness. And that's why meditation is so important, because it allows us to become aware of the thoughts that we're thinking. It allows us to become familiar with the emotions or the feelings that we're experiencing. If some and the beauty of all of this is that sometimes people will be like, I've tried meditating, Luce. I don't really know how to do it. My mind keeps racing, thoughts keep coming in. And I'm like, no, 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 that's perfect. That means that you're doing it right. And you just have to keep doing it. And the reason why it's so important is because it's a practice of recognizing a thought and then lovingly releasing it and coming back to your breath. So when you're out in your day to day and you're driving through traffic and somebody cuts you off, or you're working and your boss comes with bad news, or you're at home and you're fighting with a spouse, whatever it might look like, whatever negative circumstance might cross your path, what the beauty about meditation is, instead of if you keep doing the same things you've always done, you're going to continue to have the same results you've always had. And
Mm-hmm.
so what we want to do is really pattern interrupt and become aware of how we're feeling, what we're thinking, and how we're reacting to situations. So when someone cuts you off in traffic, instead of that unconscious habit of like flipping them off and cussing them out and being like, ah, da, 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 but instead, if we can respond with grace, love, kindness, and compassion, well, therefore, like 10% of life is what happens, and 90% is how we respond. So our power lies in the now precious moment. And if we can change how we're reacting and turning it into a constructive response, we're taking back control of our life. When we become aware of the emotions that we're experiencing, we take back control of our life. When we're able to control how we're responding to the curveballs that life is going to throw us, then we're taking back control of our life, and we're navigating to a more positive place.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple ideas from what you're saying. When you mentioned we have 60,000 thoughts a day plus, it reminds me of and I've talked about this in a different podcast episode. I call it like energy takers, energy givers in an interaction, right? It's a opposite one, and there's always an exchange when having a conversation, and maybe you have a better term for it. But essentially, what's interesting about that idea is you said, on average, people have 60,000 thoughts plus, and generally, unless you break the pattern and you're self-aware, they're often negative thoughts that keep you in a cycle. What's interesting about the conversation with somebody else is, and you may have observed this yourself, is when you're talking to someone, you go, wow, they really motivated me, or they inspired me to do something different, right? They're almost breaking that pattern for you, which almost feels like an energy give. um, which I find interesting, because I've even had conversations with people, and they'll say after the end of the phone call or meet up or whatever, they'll say, I'm pumped to go try this out. And it's almost like you're helping them break that cyclical thought pattern in their own head. But what's interesting, what you're saying is you don't even, although that's an example, you don't even have to have somebody to do that, right? You can do it yourself through meditation, because all that is required is self awareness. And what happens is your subconscious is constantly running almost on autopilot, and your ability to kind of see that is what meditation's almost doing. Become aware of your subconscious. So that brings me to what I'm thinking here is, right, okay, so people are understanding what you're saying, like, okay, Lucie, I get it. This is the reality I want. Let's say my goal is to create a six-figure business, right? That's the reality I want. I understand that I have to match that reality by raising my vibration, raising my thought pattern to that moment that I can do such a thing. And from my understanding, especially in entrepreneurship, the hardest part is almost the mindset, is getting started, because most people become afraid, or they wonder, well, what if I don't do it? Or can I really survive if I quit corporate? There's so many thought patterns that go through someone's head. I'm, I guess the next question here is, okay, you've become more self aware, you're understanding your own thought patterns and your behaviors and everything, but how does that relate to actually attracting and becoming the six-figure entrepreneur that you had the goal of getting to in the first place?
Yeah. Um, I wanted to add, just like right in the middle of everything that you just said, that
Uh-huh.
I wanted to just add to that like when you do meditate, what happens is that in your self-awareness and in the awareness of your thoughts, you become the observer of your thoughts. And then you start to realize that you are not your thoughts, that you're the observer of them, and that every single thought
Mhm.
that you think does not serve you, just like every single belief we think doesn't always serve us. That we have so many beliefs that are like, whether we want to call them like a limiting belief, or just like old paradigm. And
Mhm.
it's crazy because so many people, instead of challenging the beliefs that they have, they will defend their beliefs. And it's like when you're defending your belief system, your old way of thinking, you're fighting for your limitations. And it's like the only
Mhm.
limitations that we have are the limitations that we set for ourselves. And when you're fighting for those limitations, it's like you can keep those limitations, unfortunately. Um,
Mhm.
but to answer the question that you made, the question that you made, um, so what we do is we have a 16-week program which allows people to very intentionally rewire their subconscious mind, transform their identity, and start taking massive action towards their goals. So it's 3 pillars. So the first pillar is kind of what we'd already talked about, and it's understanding your energy or your state. And so the reason why that's important is because if you know that you are where you are today based on every single decision that you've made up until this point, we can very definitively say that decision is what shapes your destiny. So what's the one thing that is going to influence every single decision that you make? It's your state of mind, it's your emotional state, it's the energy that you're showing up in every single day. So that's when I like to ask people, well, when was the last time you were operating in a peak emotional state? What's a peak emotional state? The last time that you felt energized, when you felt passionate, when you felt unstoppable, when you felt
Mhm.
on fire, like you could just hurdle over any obstacle that was placed in your way. That is going to be a peak emotional state. And when you're operating in a peak emotional state, you're going to make drastically different decisions that are going to move you much closer, much faster towards your goals than if you're operating in lower vibrational states, if you're operating in fear or lack, scarcity, if you're operating in overwhelm or stress or fear. So the problem is that we're all conditioned. We are all conditioned based on our past, based on our parents, their beliefs, any traumas that we lived through. And the thing is that we have all become so used to living in these lower vibrational frequencies or emotions of overwhelm and stress that essentially, like, after so much time, that's who we like. After so many weeks, after so many months, after so many years of feeling stressed or feeling overwhelmed or feeling in a state of fear or uncertainty, we begin to embody those characteristics as who we are. And we forget what feeling good feels like. We forget what feeling empowered and feeling passionate and feeling excited and feeling abundant feels like. And so that's why it's so important to be able to access and maintain these peak emotional states. So that way, as you move through the day, you're setting yourself up for success because you're making decisions that are going to propel you to take the action towards the goals that you've set forth towards yourself. Just like Dr. Wayne Dyer says, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And therefore,
Mhm.
like, the whole point of life is joyous expansion. We're meant to have a our soul's evolution is to grow and to expand. And that's why it's so important to always have a goal, because a goal is a spiritual seed that pushes us to step outside of our comfort zone, to do what's hard, to grow in ways that we didn't even know were possible. So that's why it's so important to be able to become aware of the emotional state or the energetic state that you're operating in, because energy is hands down our highest form of currency. Energy, just like you said earlier, is absolutely contagious. And when you're around somebody who's vibrant and vivacious and full of life and excitement and joy, they're going to spread that, and it's going to spread like wildfire, and it's going to light up a room. Versus if
Mhm.
you're hanging out with people that are like just angry and frustrated and stressed, like that's not going to be any fun, and you're going to feel that. So it's like we are the
Right.
average of the 5 people that we choose to hang around with. So it's like, who do you want to become? So being able
Right.
to understand and identify your state, as well as being able to raise your vibration, is the first step in is like the first pillar in our program. The second pillar is desire, and that is where when we talk about desire, it's like you have to know with absolute clarity exactly what you want in life. And I love asking the question, if you could have life any way that you wanted it, if you had unlimited resources and money were of no concern, what would your life look like? And almost immediately, people will usually respond with every single thing that they don't want, listing off like, oh, I don't want this, I don't want that, I don't want that. And I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. Like, where your focus goes, your energy flows. So you can't focus on what you don't want. You have to focus on what you do want. And so that in and of itself is where we have to like retrain our brain to focus on the
Right.
good and to focus on the desire instead of focusing on the contrast. Contrast can be
I
good
love
because
the
in the contrast we find clarity. However, we don't want to focus too hard on the contrast, because then we'll be stuck in a perpetual loop of creating and experiencing what we don't want. So
right.
that's why desire is the second pillar, where it's like we go through a full vision extraction process where we help people go through 5 different realms of their life: health and wellness, fitness, spirituality, fun and lifestyle, and then relationships. And so we go through each area and find out like, okay, if we could paint your life, like let's use your imagination in brilliant, vibrant ways, exciting ways. Like let's imagine everything that could go right. And it's an incredibly powerful thing, because so many people are operating without really having any goals in mind. And it's like, if you don't have a clear mental picture of exactly what you want and who you want to become, you're not going to get there. It's like we all must develop a clear mental picture of that, and then live in that and feel that and embody the energy of that. And so the third pillar is going to be belief. And belief is what bridges the gap between where we're at and where we want to be. And what I mean by that is that we can know with absolute clarity exactly what we want. We can have our visions written out. But if we don't believe that we're worthy, if we don't believe that we're capable, if we don't believe that we're actually able or deserving enough to have the things that we say that we would like, therefore, there's always going to be a vibrational discrepancy. And the thing that we desire is always going to be just out of reach. And that's why
Mm.
it's so important is to really understand our own paradigm, which is our belief system. Our belief system, our comfort zone, is what is holding us stuck or holding us hostage in the land of mediocrity. So if we want to take our life from mediocre to magnificent, then we are going to have to really shift our paradigms. We're going to have to shift our identity. We have to essentially, like, when we talk about identity, it's like you are where you are based on every single decision you've made up until this point. Well, kind of like we said earlier, if you keep making the same decisions, you're going to keep experiencing the same results. So, what you have to do is become like a moth to the flame of your desires. And you have to give up your current identity, um, and pretty much let go of everything that you know, everything that, and that's really hard, because essentially that's like death of the ego, right? It's like,
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
many years have you been you? How long has that served you for? A really long time. So to let go of who you are and rebuild a new concept of self, a new self image with new standards, not only new standards, but also new routines, new habits, new rituals. And it's like you pretty much have to build it off of the blueprint of the person you want to become. So to your example, if you're talking to somebody who wants to build a six-figure business, well, what does that business look like, and what does the person running it look like? Who is the person running it? What do they look like? How are they dressed? How do they speak? How do they carry themselves? What is the energy that they carry themselves? And most importantly, what are their beliefs? What do they believe to be true about the world? And how does that differ from the beliefs that you carry? So then it's all about adopting the beliefs and the energy of the person that already has those things and lives that lifestyle. Because the sooner that you're able to let go of your old identity and step into this new identity and embody the energy of that person who already has that lifestyle, that is how you will begin to create the lifestyle of your dreams. But it's a process, and it takes a lot of focus and a lot of intention, and a lot of repetition, but it absolutely can be done. But that's
Mhm.
the exciting part, that we can rewire our subconscious mind as long as we are just intentional, and we do the work.
Right. So you said the three pillars are goals, desires, and belief, correct? Is that what was the
Energy,
first one?
energy,
Energy,
energy, desire, and belief. Yes.
belief. Okay. Yeah, there's so much to unpack here, right? I think another key point you mentioned is the ego death, which I think is, you know, that could be a whole episode on its own because it's like you said, it's a long, tedious process. This isn't like, okay, I'll give myself a week to recreate my ego. It's almost painful, like you mentioned, right? Because you're
Oh,
you're
super
letting go of,
scary.
yeah, yeah. Not only is it's scary, it's uncharted territory for your own life and perspective, and um, it's almost a solo journey too. I mean, although you can talk about it with other people, that still it's something that you have to go through and figure out. Okay, what is my desires and beliefs, and it's there's so much to it. And I think what's really interesting is how you mentioned. So, for example, let's say you do want to be this person that is a six-figure entrepreneur, almost to recreate who that would be and then work backwards to get there, right? So it's okay, their belief system would be like this, they would carry themselves this way, they wouldn't to do these activities, they would do these, and you kind of
Yes.
create this puzzle, and you start working almost backwards on how can you go from B to A. And I think what you said, like the stepping stones being, well, first you need to have a burning desire for it, also as well as the beliefs, and then you have to match that energy. I think those are all key components to becoming that, because even from my own experiences, you know, you had mentioned this a little earlier regarding the quote about we're a spiritual being having a human experience. I find that really interesting
Yeah.
because I started this show maybe 3.5 years ago, and I wasn't really sure what it was going to be about. But this was around the time I had a lot of changes going on, also pandemic. I had wanted to be a doctor my whole life, and this was the first time I was questioning, do I even want that anymore? Or, why did I want to be that in the first place? Is what I'm learning resonating with what I wanted all along? And these were very painful questions. And later do I find out, with some hindsight and looking back and reflecting, it wasn't exactly what I was looking for in healthcare. I was looking for more holistic preventative medicine, and less reactive care and things like that. But that's a whole side tangent. But there was a lot going on, and there was a identity shift. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was like, okay, I want to, this is a desire of mine. I'm really interested in this type of stuff. So I wanted to start a podcast, but I didn't know what I would be about. So just, slowly started. And over time, I realized a strong interest and curiosity that I just keep circling back to is this idea about the human experience and what really is it. because if you look at it, there's so much to life that I think we just kind of brush past, especially if we're not as self-aware of what we're doing and what's going on. We tend to just kind of brush it off. So I found that topic very interesting. So when you mention spiritual being have a human experience, I think that's so fitting here, because so many people might have portions of what you just talked about. They might have the goals or they might have the desire, but they don't have the belief. And I've seen that plenty of times in people as well. They have the burning desire, they have even goals written down, but then they don't have the belief in themselves. Maybe due to
Yeah.
whoever, whatever affected them in the past. They're like a chip on your shoulder type thing. They're holding it,
Yeah.
and that release is an art in itself to figure out how to kind of maneuver. And I see this is why, and I've interviewed plenty of entrepreneurs, and they kind of all, you know, it's a pattern. They tend to say similar things in regards that, like, the hardest part is the beginning. The hardest part is making your first 100,000 million, right? It's always the first is the hardest, because that first step requires you to do so much that you've never done before, that it's like that quote, um, 80% of the rocket fuel is to just get off the ground, and then momentum or
Yeah.
gravity, right, it just carries you the rest of the way. That momentum is what you're trying to build, and with that zero momentum, that's the hard part. And I think that gaining momentum part is what you're talking about, is the belief system and figuring out your limiting beliefs. And uh, and I've seen this plenty of times too, even on people commenting on different interviews and shows. They'll say things like, uh, like, this is just more mindset stuff, like, why is everybody talking about mindset stuff? What's the real secret to making the six
Mindset's so
figures?
powerful.
Hmm.
It's just like
Right,
how we choose to show up in the world, how we choose to see the world is how we are going to experience the world. If we
right.
say, like, if so many people have these like limiting beliefs that they don't even realize they're limiting, they just take them at face value, like, oh, bad things happen to good people. Well, like, that's not necessarily true. Or like, money's hard to make, but is it? And so
Mm,
it's kind of just like when you take a step back and you're like, okay, well, what does this person, like, for example, like you were talking about a six-figure entrepreneur and how like it is hard to take the first couple steps because that's not who you are yet, and it's in the process of transforming yourself and lining up with your new identity. If you're like, okay, well, if I'm going to be a world class podcaster, what does a world podcaster do? What are their daily
hmm.
tasks? What is their morning routine? How many people are they reaching out to? How many pre interviews are they doing? And then it's like, what does their schedule look like? Are they using a calendar? All of these little like small details, but it all comes into play. And it's just like once you start developing the habits of a world class podcaster, well, guess what? The faster that you're gonna collapse those timelines and become that person yourself. But and identity is one of our strongest motivators. Human beings, like, it is an inborn nature within us that we want to show up in congruency with who we believe we are. We want to show up in
Mm.
integrity with the image of like that of our own self-image, of our own self-concept. Well, if we've got a crummy self-concept, if we don't have a big enough image of ourself, a big enough self-concept, then we're doing ourselves a huge disservice. And that's why it's so important to dream big. Like you should, like your dreams should be so big that they excite you and terrify you at the exact same time.
Right. Yeah, I love this topic, because something that I've kind of distilled over time is this idea of having visions of what you want, right? You want to be a world-class podcaster, you want to be a successful entrepreneur, whatever that may look like to you. Have these visions and then goals, right? Because the desire creates what your vision is. Your goals help you get there, but then like we've been talking about, the hard part is the belief. And I think even over the course of this 3 years plus that I've been doing this, the hardest part, and I can vouch, is the beliefs. Is, the beginning, it was imposter syndrome. It was who am I to get on a mic and just start sharing opinions, right, and things like that. And definitely just jumping into that. is what we've been talking about. I think that's just the hardest part. And I find it really interesting when you talked about self-limiting beliefs, because you had mentioned this earlier, what you focus on, where attention goes, energy flows. And I love this quote, or I love this illustration of when you're skiing down a mountain and you're trying not to hit the trees. If you keep looking at the tree, that's all you're going to hit, right? And it's almost like your brain
Yes.
filters the same way. It's, well, the people that are in a victim mindset or think that life happens to them instead of for them, their perspective is tree, tree, tree. And next thing you know, they hit another one and another one. Versus if you just
And then their
go the
experience
course.
is, yeah. And then it's just like, and the
Cyclical.
people who are in that like victim mentality, they're like, oh, well, life doesn't happen for me. It happens to me. And then they have a whole laundry list of examples. Oh, this happened and this happened and this happened. And this is why my life sucks. And this is why I can't ever get ahead in life. And this person did me wrong. And it's just like, just stop. Like, stop with the story. Your past is in the past. We have the decision at any given time if we want to be defined by a memory of the past or a vision of the future. And it's so important for people to understand that we don't have to be defined by our past. We don't have to be defined by our current circumstances. All we have to do is lean into our imagination and lean into unshakable faith. And that faith is what is going to be the catalyst to take us where we want to go. But if we don't have, what's my camera doing? There we go. And we're back. If we don't have that unshakable faith, we're constantly doubting ourselves. And that's why it's so funny to me when people are like, I don't know, they'll say something like, oh, I'm a Christian, I can't meditate. And I'm like, it's all connected. Like, it's all like divine source energy. This is all like everything that I preach is in the Bible. Seek and ye shall find. Open, like, knock and the door will be open to you. It's just, oh, I'm sorry. I
You're
get the
good.
dog running.
I was gonna say, is that a
um,
horse in the background?
it's she hears the motorcycle pulling up, so she was sleeping at my feet, and I'm just like,
Uh,
last time she did that, it unplugged the laptop. And so
oh no.
yeah, she's something else. But that's like the fun impromptu part of these podcasts, is that we just roll with it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I
Yeah,
mean,
just like life,
no,
right? You never know what's
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
happen, but you just make the best of it.
yeah. I mean, I think it's spot on. I why do you think it is that belief systems are the most difficult portion, right? Eh, and then how can someone truly break that? Is that where meditation is key here? Is that what you think? Um,
I think that
because
belief systems, it's so our paradigm is our belief system, and our paradigm is what is keeping us stuck where we are today. So therefore, it's our job to shift our paradigm, to rewrite our story. That's what I was going to say right before the dog moved, is that we all get stuck in these stories, and a story is nothing more than something that you play on repeat and that you keep telling yourself and you keep repeating to the world. And eventually it's like, if you say something enough times, you're going to believe it. All you have to do at any given moment is take a pencil and a paper and write out a new story. We are the powerful creators of our own reality. We are the powerful imaginative narrators of our own script. And so we have the power to change our story at any given time. And that's what people don't necessarily understand, or they don't embrace. And so I would say meditation is just one of the many tools that
yeah,
people can do to rewire their subconscious mind. It's really important to remember that our subconscious mind is the most susceptible first thing in the morning, right when we're waking up, as well as right before we're falling asleep, because that's when our mind is in a theta brainwave. So
hmm,
that's why when we talk about morning routines and evening routines, they're so powerful, because it's like, if we know that we live in a vibrational universe where we don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. It's like we have to do the work every single day. And when we can take back control of our morning, we take back control of our day, which means we take back control of our weeks, our months, our life. And so a lot of things that I like to teach are kind of built into morning routine, evening routine frameworks. So meditation, yes, is definitely one of them. Another one are gratitude lists. Like the power of gratitude is so, it's just like it's extraordinary. There have been nights where, so it's like every night, before I go to sleep, I write out every single thing that I'm grateful for, and it might be something small, like I'm grateful for my cold shower and my hot oatmeal, or it might be something big, like, oh my God, I'm so grateful. Yesterday, it was like there was like this miraculous horse sale, and my girlfriend in Michigan, because I'm in St. Louis right now, but she's my friend slash assistant. She ended up showing and successfully showing a horse to a buyer last minute, and she's actually delivering the horse today. So like that was like a huge unexpected miracle, or just a gift of abundance, if you will. So
Right.
basically I'll write out what I'm grateful for, and then at the end of my gratitudes I always write tomorrow's forecast. And so what that is that's a means of intention setting, and I'm really really big on like the power of intention and understanding like the power of imagination and the power, and then combining that with your intention. So whatever you want to experience or attract into tomorrow, I'll go ahead and write it into tomorrow's forecast. So if I know that, like, for example, I have podcasts today, I'll write like fun, amazing podcast. Or if I have a workout, I'll put like rock star leg day, or incredible training with Jenner Mickey, whatever. And so I just use my imagination. And sometimes I'll write like even if I don't have a horse sale planned or scheduled, I just might be feeling good that night, and I'll be like, horse sale question mark. And then and then it's like so wild, because on those days that I write horse sale question mark, those are the days that I have like an out of state buyer call me out of the blue and be like, oh hey, I'm really interested in your horse Turbo. Can you send me some videos? I'd love to send a deposit, and then we can plan on shipping him across the country or whatever it is. But it's like whatever. And so I'll always write things like alignment and abundance, because I always like to invite alignment and abundance into every single day. But then I might write like, I might write like joy, laughter, freedom, and fun. Or I might write anything really, just like perfect health and unlimited energy. I might write like passion and purpose, whatever I feel inspired to write. It might be like laughter and delightful surprises. Or one time I wrote prosperity. Like I always write alignment and abundance. But this one day I wrote prosperity, and I'm not even kidding you. The very next day, I found an envelope with over $10,000 cash in it. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, I wrote prosperity in my tomorrow's forecast last night. I'm like, no way. And it was so funny, because my boyfriend and I were just talking. He was like telling me, he's like, yeah, Lucy, you can't just like, he's like, you probably can't just like write down like, oh, I want to manifest more money, and then it instantly shows up. And I'm like, no, like I have to disagree with you. In my experience, I believe that you can just write down like, I would like to invite more prosperity into my life. I'm a money magnet. I enjoy multiple streams of income. I am the perfect energetic match to wealth, abundance, and prosperity. And just like writing out these things, I'm like, you can absolutely attract more abundance without necessarily doing anything. Just your time, attention, focus. Like there's so much power in focus. And that's the difference between people that are like critiquing this whole law of attraction thing and saying like, oh, it's a bunch of like pie in the sky woohoo nonsense. But they don't understand like the power of focus, the power of attention. Where your focus goes, your energy flows. Anything you place your attention on for more than 17 seconds begins to build up momentum. And the more you talk about it, and the more you embody the energy of it, the more you emotionalize the excitement of whatever it is that you want to create or experience in your life, the faster that you're going to draw that experience to you. So it's like so funny, because like I was just telling the boyfriend, I'm like, no, like I totally believe that you can manifest large sums of money without really any work. And like, I'm not even kidding you. 3 days later, I wrote prosperity. Next day, envelope of cash. Like what?
So,
So, that's really,
so
so
what
there's
is,
lots of different cool
yeah.
things.
Well, so, and I know that's a huge buzzword, hot topic is this idea of manifestation. I think that's really the segue into this whole area is most people have heard of the idea of manifestations, right? So what exactly, how does that, is that the same thing as law of attraction? How does that work?
So
Right?
sometimes what I hear people say is they're like, I want to become a better manifester. I want to become a better manifester. And what I really want everybody to understand is that you already are an incredibly powerful manifester. We are all manifesting. I like to say that every moment is a manifested miracle. It just depends. Are you a default creator or are you a deliberate creator? Because 98% of the world is what I like to call a default creator, which means they're living from the outside in, which means they're
Mm,
allowing their external reality, aka their current circumstances, to to determine how they're feeling inwardly. And it's just like, and that's the Newtonian model of the world. So Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this very eloquently, and he explains that the Newtonian model of the world is all about cause and effect. What that means is we experience an event, and after experiencing that event, then we experience the emotion secondary to that event. Well, the quantum model of the world is flipping that around, and it's causing an event, which means if we can think a thought that's going to physically make us feel sick, then we can also think a thought that's going to bring us health and healing. Meaning, if we can, and that's whether we're talking about health, whether we're talking about relationships, whether we're talking about finances, whatever it is, whatever area of your life you want to improve, emotionalize the energy of the desire already fulfilled prior to experiencing the manifestation or the thing that it is that you want. Internalize that, and that is where your power lies. And therefore, if you experience the emotion of that, that's living from the inside out. And when you do that, when you put all of your focus, all of your attention, and switch your energy into what you into already having experienced or created or attracted that thing, you are going to therefore attract that thing into your 3D reality that much faster. But that's the
mhm.
difference between a deliberate creator and a default creator, is we can't allow external circumstances that are outside of us dictate how we're feeling inside.
And what's the difference between someone having a desire for the thing and someone being overly eager, right? So there is a difference between, and I, from my understanding of this topic, it's, you set the desire, the intention, and then just kind of, you know, go about your day, your goals. You don't, but if you're constantly acting in the state of, I guess, scarcity or neediness of that thing, you're almost not getting it, right? So where's that line between setting the desire versus, being needy?
Yeah. So there's always like there's always two sides to the coin. So when we're talking about money, for example, like manifesting more money, there's always like, okay, I have the desire to manifest more money or to watch my bank accounts grow. And so there is the energy of excitement, joy, and gratitude of actually like, oh my gosh, I am so grateful to watch my bank accounts grow each and every week. It's amazing. Versus the energy of lack, which is like,
Mm,
really, really need some money. I really want to see that money show up. Like, I could
yeah,
really use some money, gotta pay them bills. And so
yeah.
there's like I said, there's two sides of every coin. There's the having and then there's the lack of it. And so I was actually just working with one of my students, and she's, if you're familiar with real estate, she's a wholesaler. And so what she does
Hmm.
is she gets properties under contract and then she rehabs and flips them. Um,
Right.
and she was like, she reached out to me, and she's one of the people that I send my gratitudes to. And so I send her
Hmm.
my gratitudes, she sends me her gratitudes back, and in her gratitudes at the end she's like, I'm really struggling because I'm praying and I'm meditating, but I've been working with this buyer, and I'm sorry, I've been working with this seller because I want to buy his house for the last 6 months, and we can't close, and like I can't seem to get him to close on this deal. And I've been doing all the things, and I don't know, like I'm trying to stay positive, but it's been really difficult for me. And then I asked her about it. I'm like, tell me about that a little bit. Like, let's dig a little bit deeper. And she's like, I've been meditating, I've been praying. And I'm like, okay, well, when you think about this, you need to switch your energy about it. Instead of thinking about this and feeling the lack, feeling the worry, feeling the stress of like, oh my God, like that pit in your stomach of like, darn it, like this contract's still not, this house is not under contract. I still haven't closed it. Like, I wonder if this is going to happen. Like that feeling of insecurity. I'm like, stop feeling that and start feeling the excitement and the joy and the celebration of already having closed that contract and having that deal under contract. And she's just like, okay. I'm like, and she's like, well, how do I do that? And I'm like, well, the first thing that you can start doing is writing out affirmations. And I didn't want to give her all the affirmations at first. I'm like, well, you write your affirmations out. Let me see what you write. And then I can kind of see like where she's at, like where her headspace is at and what her affirmations look like. And like, so she wrote me some like pretty good ones, but they were not all in present or past tense. And the reason why that's so important, if you're saying like in her example about like closing the house, she's like, I'm so excited that we're going to close this house soon. And it's just like, no, stop saying that. Say like, I am so happy and so grateful that we've already closed this property with ease. I am so grateful that we had a lovely day. We had a lovely afternoon at the title agency signing all the contracts, and that my husband Richie and I were able to go out to lunch afterwards to celebrate closing this contract. I am such an incredible wholesaler. I radiate confidence and certainty to every seller I speak to. I attract high equity houses with sellers that are eager to close within days of meeting me. And I went through like a whole list. And the exciting part is that 6 days later, she calls me up and she's like, Lucie, you're never going to believe this. I'm like, what? What's up? And she's just like, I closed on the house. She's like, I've been trying to close on the house for 6 months. She's like, every single day for the past 6 days, I've been reading your affirmations out loud. And she's like, we just closed and we just signed the paperwork today. I'm so excited. Thank you so much. So that's why I get so excited about doing this, because not only do I get to like celebrate my wins, but I get to celebrate all of the wins for all of my students and kind of like just
Yeah.
help them tweak their perspective or tweak the way they're doing things, and make those shifts so that way they're able to essentially manifest the life of their dreams.
Right. And I find this topic so interesting because even in my own personal life, I always try to think in terms of abundance instead of scarcity. And it always ends up somehow, you know, life always has ups and downs. And it's somehow, when you think in abundance, you think with positivity, things start to work out and you start to think differently. And I find that, you know, it's almost like you're you're putting this energy into the world that you are grateful, you are okay where you are, right? And even if you're in a tight financial spot, thinking in terms of abundance, eventually, something works out, something catches up to you. I even experienced that in my own life. But yeah, I mean, I think there's nothing more than what you've said is incredibly powerful, right? The idea of how you manifest something is in order to just almost think as though it's already occurred. And even I think this works. A beautiful example of sales is when you're needy, it's almost
Yeah.
off-putting,
It's
right?
like a repellent.
It's like,
Yeah.
what are you trying to sell me? I don't want your thing, right? But if you're like, hey, this is my expertise, this is what I advise. If you and actually even better examples, I've even done podcast episodes where, and I've seen the difference when somebody's constantly talking about their book or constantly trying to sell something on the show versus somebody who just kind of shares their advice. And like at the end, they're like, hey, I help people. If you're interested, just let me know. And then there's like, one is like, okay, they don't need they don't need my money. They're here to help, and it almost shows, right? And that, I think that works
Totally. When
perfectly
you
with
show
sales.
up, yeah, when you show up from an energy of service, it's totally different than an
And
energy
abundance.
of neediness. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
so powerful. Like when you shift your perspective and be like, okay, how can I serve? How can I give back? Like people feel that and that resonates with them. And honestly, it just feels so much better. It feels incredible. And you know that you're helping people all over the world. And that's what's so exciting.
Yeah. Well, Lucie, the show is called Learn or Be Learned, so I like to ask one last question to close off the show, which is, what is one life lesson that either you've learned from someone or you want the audience to learn from your own life that you want to share today?
I think I think some of the best advice that I was given, and as simple as this may sound, is just to dream big. Because
Mm,
again, the only limitations we have are the limitations that we place on ourselves. And anytime we set an intention or we set a goal, we're bound to achieve it. So it's just like, why not dream big? And the perfect example was when I was just getting started into real estate after I'd quit my corporate job and um, pursued the horses full time. I was like, wow, if I just invested in a couple of real estate properties, then I would have that passive income. And so, sure enough, I wrote down like it was like 2015, I bought my first rental property. 2016, I had bought my second rental property. And 2017 rolled around. I'm like, oh, well, I'll like this year, I'll buy my third rental property. And then I had went
mhm.
to a conference or a workshop that was like, dear humans, we love you so much, but you guys don't dream big enough. Like you guys are the masters of limitations, and like really open yourself up to like step into the receiving mode and ask for more, because when you ask, you shall receive. And I was like, okay. I'm like, so
Mm,
instead of my third rental house, I'm like, this year I'm going to buy three rental houses and double my portfolio. Like, how exciting is that? And I didn't know how I
yeah.
was going to do it. I certainly didn't have the money, the funds, the means to do it, but I wrote it down on my piece of paper. And again, just writing it down, like journaling is an incredibly powerful tool that people doubt. Like people don't understand the power of the pen and writing out your intentions. And so I had wrote that down. And then sure enough, August, September, and October of that year, I had bought three different properties. And like every single one of them fell into my lap in this like super magical, like serendipitous way that I could never have imagined myself. So that would probably be my biggest uh just advice to the audience, is like stop doubting yourself, step like use your imagination in like wild, audacious, just vibrant ways, and dream big, even if you don't know how. Like what's that goal that like excites you and terrifies you that you're like kind of scared to tell people, because like you don't know like how they would receive that, you don't know like how they're gonna like look at you and be like, wait, you want that? Like that's the goal, focus on that. And
Right.
then just
Right.
write that out, focus on that, talk about that, dream about that, because where our focus goes, our energy flows. What we think about, what we speak about is what we'll bring about. So if you're writing out those affirmations every single day, it's just a matter of time before doors open and opportunities present themselves. And the next thing you know, what you didn't think was remotely possible soon becomes your current reality. So dream big, my
Yeah.
friends.
Yeah, I agree. I often tell people as well, not to always like when I talk to friends and stuff, is not to often share goals with people always, because you don't know how they're going to react, because some people will, it's a reflection of their own self-limiting the beliefs that they place onto you, right? It's
Yes.
like, can you really do that? Well, it's often a reflection of how they're thinking, is like, well, I couldn't do that, so why would you think that big, right? I think another small point here with thinking big is that the reason I think this stuff gets a bad rep is like, someone might go, okay, well, so I can just join the NBA if I think big enough. Well, it's like, another key point to what you're saying is desire. Is that truly what you desired, right? And I think a portion of desire comes from maybe reflection of your past, or reflection of your interests, because everything has a sacrifice as well, right? So if you truly
Yes.
desire to make, what is it? Let's say you like, I think a classic example, if you truly desire to be a billionaire, there are certain sacrifices that you must make. Your time is limited. Maybe you have to work so hard to be upfront. And if you already have a family, then you're sacrificing time there. And so it's like, is that truly what you wanted? Right? Is that the true desire? Because then you might realize, well, I also desire being with my family. So then it's like, okay, then that's not truly where your desire is. I think a portion of thinking big is aligning it with the true desires that you want.
Right.
Hmm. Well, Lucie, thank you so much for being on the show. I really had a great time, and I think the audience is going to love what you had to say.
Well, thank you, Shiva. I also had an incredible time. So nice meeting you.